Hello, friends. My name is Caitlin Elliott, and I'm going to be talking to you today on the broad topic of getting to know ESE. I'm going to use the acronym ESE before explaining it. We will explain it as we get further into our presentation. But I would like to give y'all a broad understanding of what ESE is. I know that many of you watching or listening may be education majors from music to early education, elementary, all the way to middle, high school, and beyond. And I want to cover some foundational facts and ideas for ESE. And in order to do that, I'd like to address three questions. So, number one, what is ESE? Two, what is differentiation? And three, which students can benefit from differentiation? So as we proceed, if you want to write these down or ponder these, my goal is to answer these for you today. So first, who am I? Why am I here? Well, I'm currently serving as assistant principal at the school, actually the laboratory school on your campus, Pathway School of Excellence. I'm at assistant principal now, but I started as a teacher, and before that I was in Hillsborough County's public school system as a resource teacher. My nanny, who is this lady in the right of our family photo, you can see at the top, she was a special needs school bus driver when I was a young girl all the way up through my middle and high school years. And I always was an assistant for her, helped her on the bus, washed her school bus, went and visited all of her exceptional students. She drove for a lot of physically handicapped students, and I always helped her. And I really enjoyed these students and learned that they were my friends. So I grew up with exceptional students, and it kind of kick-started my profession in the ESE world. And that's kind of, long story short, of how I got here. So how about you? Think about it. Why are you choosing, or why did you choose the degree you currently are pursuing? I'm assuming everyone watching or listening is in somewhere in the educational field. Why did you choose your degree? And I ask that question because the Bible talks a lot, well, in great depth about being an educator. In James chapter 3, this is the King James Version, it says, "My brethren, be not many masters, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation." And masters in this verse is referring to teachers. One of the commentaries that I read when I do my Bible study talks about how many people want to be teachers and have the distinction to grow and educate the community, but they ought to also know and seriously consider, and I quote, that teachers must stand a greater or more strict judgment greater than other men and women. So being an educator is one of the greatest professions ever, in my opinion. And it's also important to know that as a profession, you have the ability and the honor to influence children and students every day. Whether you're a kindergarten teacher and you have 15 to 20 kindergartners, or you're a middle or high school teacher and you see 50 to 100 plus students a day, you are personally and having firsthand experience to impact these students every day. And our goal ultimately is to show the love of Christ to them so that ultimately one day they can come to know Jesus as their Lord and Savior. But God holds us to a higher standard because we're educating His children. So just something that I like to consider and also tell you, when we talk about this, not only is it super important, but I assume and understand the great responsibility that comes with it, which is why I like to cover these three bases. God has given us a great role as educators, but He also expects great things from us with that. So with that in mind, let's dive into what is ESE. So I will go ahead and read what the Florida Department of Education defines it as. It says, in Florida, children with disabilities who need specifically designed instruction and related services are called exceptional students. The special help or instruction they are given at school is called exceptional student education. So now you know, if you hear the acronym ESE, it is referring to exceptional student education. To go further into the Individuals with Disability Education Act, or IDEA, a child's deficits must fall within 13 different categories. And you can see them listed there on the right. Some of them you may be very familiar with and others not so much. But if you teach in Florida or in our public school system, they use these labels to some degree to identify the disabilities that their students have. So, looking at this list can be overwhelming, but who will have students? So, exceptional students, or who will have students with varying disabilities? Is it only special education majors? Is it only elementary majors will have special needs students, or exceptional students, or secondary majors, or all educators? And the answer is all educators. The great thing about educating is God has made us all fearfully and wonderfully and uniquely different. So every student you teach or educate will be completely different from the others, which is wonderful because God knows us and He's equipped us to educate. But it's important to remember that all educators have the opportunity to have exceptional students within his or her classroom. That can mean that you are aware and you know you have an exceptional student, or that can mean a student has slipped through the cracks and has never been identified with a disability, whether physical or learning, and they have been put into your classroom, and maybe they have prior struggles that they don't understand why they struggle, and you have the opportunity to help them. So what do we do when we have students who struggle? Well, we're going to use differentiation. Since all of us will more than likely have some experience with exceptional students, how will we teach them? We will use differentiation. And we'll dive straight in. So our first question is, what is ESE? We answered that. So keep thinking about that. What is differentiation? And that's what we're going to answer right now. Differentiation looks different in every classroom. As mentioned, every student, every class, every teacher is vastly different. At its most basic level, differentiation consists of the efforts of teachers to respond to variance among learners in the classroom. And it can look vastly different depending on the subject and the grade level you teach. And this is a quick graphic organizer for you, but differentiation includes differentiating the content, which is what they're expected to know, the process, which are assignments and activities they're given to engage with or make sense of what they've learned, products, as many of us know, such as book reports and papers and related things, are what we produce to show we have gained understanding. And then the learning environment. How is your classroom structured? What does it look like? What does your schedule look like? Things like that. So these are 4 areas in which differentiation can occur. Now I want to give some specific examples in content. Some will be quick and easy to see, and some you'll have to think about. So I have put a second grade language arts standard at the top of this slide. It's to ask and answer questions, such questions as who, what, where, when, why, and how, to demonstrate understanding of key details in a text. So what I have differentiated here is the text. These are very, very differentiated. The first text is a true second to late second grade reading level, and the second passage is more of a kindergarten first grade level. And as you can see, they're both talking about Diego wanting a pet, but the reading is differentiated. So I may have a second grader who could read the first passage. I may have a second grader who could read the second passage. But why not let different students read different passages if they can gain the same information? So here is another case scenario. So differentiation is not, okay class, I'm teaching this to you one time, so sit down and listen closely. Differentiation is, okay friends, today we will learn about fractions. I will teach the entire class, and then we will break up into groups as we complete our practice work. that allows students to receive the same information but then receive different levels of help depending on what group they're in. Maybe one group has fraction tiles. Maybe one group is completing a worksheet to show what they learn. Maybe another group is finding examples of how fractions can be used in our everyday, day-to-day lives. So let's do another case scenario. Today we will write a non-fiction story about Abe Lincoln. First we will break into groups and I will review each group's rubric. And as you can see, each group has a different requirement for pages that have to be written. A non-example is, today we will all write a non-fiction story about Abe Lincoln. Everyone will write 10 pages no matter what. I will pass out the rubrics to the whole class. So again, differentiation is not changing the content, but in this specific example, if we go back to how can you differentiate, we differentiated the process or the product. So we did not require all students to produce the same amount of work, but they're still demonstrating the content and their knowledge of it. Going back to the fraction ones, this is a visual example of what group work may look different, or how it may look different from group to group. And that's okay. And differentiation also requires you to set a standard in your class of being a classroom family and respecting each other, even though we all do different work. So that is what I have for differentiation. Now, what is ESE? We learned that ESE is exceptional student education, and the learners in the ESE world are called exceptional students, and they have varying disabilities and abilities. 2, what is differentiation? Differentiation is, simply put, I like to tell people differentiation is teaching the individual, not the whole. Teaching the unique and wonderful individuals that God has allowed us to educate, rather than lumping them in and assuming that they're all the same, because we know as Christians and children of God that they're not. So 3, which students can benefit from differentiation? Now answer that in your head, but from current research and hands-on experience in the classroom, my experience is that all students can benefit from differentiation. So even if I teach in a classroom where there are no exceptional students per se, they are all quote-unquote typical and mainstreamed in the general education classrooms, they can still learn from differentiated instruction because all students are different, again, fearfully and wonderfully made and uniquely different. So it's important to remember differentiation is universal and can help all of your students. Last thing, a lot of students, college students, ask me what is RTI, and RTI looks different depending on the school or the district or the state that you're in, but RTI is response to intervention. It's a multi-tier approach to the early identification and support of students with learning and behavioral needs. For example, when I was a resource teacher, I had a 3rd grader who had never been given a label for a disability, and come to find out she was majorly dyslexic. So they labeled her, in our district, they considered it a learning disability. And we went through many processes. We tried whole group instruction, and we had to prove or show the data that she did not retain the information. We tried small group instruction. We tried pull-out instruction, where she was pulled in a one-on-one teacher and with her situation, where we had to take data of how that instruction helped her. And then we had to analyze what was best for her, what errors we were seeing, things like that. So that's what RTI is. And I always like to throw that in. If you have questions for me, since we're learning remotely, I want you to have my email. It's kmelliott@scu.edu. And feel free to email me if you have questions about pathways or the field of education, or exceptional student education, or any of those related questions. I love helping problem solve and find answers if you need them. So email me. Thank you so much for tuning in and for allowing me to share some information with you. I hope it's sparked your interest and also allowed you to gain perspective of how to educate all of God's children who are fearfully and wonderfully made different. Thank you so much.